When it comes to buying a car, what makes the most sense and what's best for the average person? Is it buying new or used? And most importantly, how much car can you actually afford to buy? Well, the answer to those questions might surprise some of you, but before we get into it and dive deeper, there's a few things that we need to discuss first. In general, there are 3 things that are certain in life. And no, we're not talking about death and taxes in this list of 3. In this case, it's 1, you're always gonna need somewhere to live. 2, you're always gonna need to eat food so that you don't die. And 3, at some point you're gonna have to find a transportation method to get you around that isn't just your 2 legs. And that's the one that we're discussing today. Now, these 3 things, housing, food, and transportation, are typically considered to be the biggest expenses that take up the bulk of a person's budget. And what that means is that understanding and being intentional with the amount of money that you spend in these 3 categories is extremely important. In theory, you could be someone that doesn't really spend money on the little things, but it ultimately doesn't really matter if the majority of your income is going towards your rent, food, and/or a car payment. Now, when it comes to Dennis and I, we've never actually owned a car, at least not yet. We've spent our adult lives living in very walkable cities, so the need for a car hasn't really been there. And also, we've luckily worked very close to home or literally at home. But obviously, this isn't the case for everyone. Sometimes people literally need to buy a car based on either where they live, if you're not close to a major city and transportation system, based on the need for the convenience that having a car brings, like the ability to get anywhere at any time, or even just simply the fact that it's the cultural norm. So today we're gonna break down whether or not you should buy a car, and then how much car you can actually comfortably afford to buy based on your financial situation. So let's get into it.
In life, we're taught or shown from a very young age that the car you drive says everything about you, whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. And trust me, even if you're not a car person, or even if you and your family aren't car people, you still have thoughts on cars, whether you actively acknowledge it or not. When you see someone driving a luxury vehicle, even if you don't know your BMWs from your Mercedes, you can't help but think, wow, what a nice car. Or even wonder what that person does for a living that allows them to drive a luxury vehicle, even if you're thinking it subconsciously. Well, all of this happens by design. In fact, when I think of a classic commercial, the first ad that pops into my head is a classic car commercial. And sure, every now and then you'll get a used car dealer that's advertising the used cars on their lot. But for the most part, we're used to seeing multi-million-dollar ads that want us to envision what our lifestyles would look like if we bought that company's newest car model. We're basically being convinced that a new car, regardless of the brand, will make our families love us or envy us more, make us feel more safe and secure, or it'll actually give us the freedom to go anywhere we want. But in reality, this couldn't be further from the truth. From a financial standpoint, cars are said to be one of the worst assets that anyone can buy. And this is because, especially when we're talking about new cars, they're said to have a very high rate of depreciation. Depreciation is basically a measurement of how quickly something loses its value over a specific period of time. When it comes to new cars, they lose about 20 to 30% of their value within that first year of ownership. Then if we fast forward to the 5th year of ownership, a car could have lost up to 60% of its initial value. You know, Steph actually said something the other day to me that I had never really thought about, and it's that no one, and I mean absolutely no one, actually buys a brand new car. This is because cars depreciate as soon as they're driven off the lot. They're considered used as soon as you drive away. So basically you go in to buy a new car, but you leave with the used one, which is pretty crazy if you think about it. It's almost like as soon as you sign the paperwork and you exit the car lot in your new car, something magical happens where the status of your car just automatically changes, which triggers a significant drop in value, regardless of whether your car has little to no mileage and 0 wear and tear. Given all of this, the majority of research actually suggests that a used car is likely the way to go from both a value and a financial well-being perspective. And the sweet spot when it comes to purchasing a used vehicle is buying one that's between 3 to 5 years old. And the reason for this is that when a car is in that range, it's already gone through its sharpest decline in value due to depreciation, making it much more affordable than a brand new model. And on top of that, the car might still be eligible for factory and extended warranties, and insurance costs will typically be lower for a used model. Also, keep in mind that a car within the 3 to 5 year range is typically called a lightly used vehicle. Now, if you're someone who doesn't care about having the latest technology, so think Apple CarPlay, adaptive cruise control, 360 cameras, having more kilometers on the car, and the potential for more frequent and more expensive repair costs, then you could still get great value for your money by buying a car that's even older than the 3 to 5 year range. Now, everything we just covered is true for the majority of vehicles, but it's also important to understand that the car market can change, and as a result, Prices can go up or down depending on a variety of different factors. Right now in 2025, we're feeling the effects of low supply and increased demand in the used car market. And according to the Globe and Mail, the days of being able to find a good used car for $5,000 to $7,000 are sadly over.
This brings us to the question of how much car can you actually afford to buy? Well, there actually isn't just one perfect answer, but there are a number of guidelines that you can use as a reference point. The first one is purchasing a vehicle that accounts for no more than 10 to 15% of your annual income. This guideline is very simple and straightforward. For example, if you make $60,000 a year, then you should ideally aim to spend no more than $6,000 to $9,000 on a car. And keep in mind that we're assuming that we're talking about a used vehicle here. Now, what's interesting is that when you're hearing this, you might be thinking that we're crazy to even suggest a range that's so low, given the current state of the used car market. I know that we're the ones that literally just said that the days of finding a used car in that $5,000 to $7,000 range are gone. Well, that's because everything has to be told in context. If you're out there looking for a used vehicle and the prices of the current market aren't aligning with your personal income, then depending on your situation and what you're looking for in a used vehicle, it might mean that you should either simply keep your current car and not upgrade right now if that's what you're trying to do, or it might mean that you have to increase this percentage to the 20 to 25% mark in order to find something that makes sense for you personally. What's important here is understanding that you're meant to use this as a guideline so that you have the right mindset around how much you can actually afford, but you do also have to take into account your financial reality and also the current state of the car market. I also want to highlight that we personally believe in paying for a vehicle outright, in full, and in cash if you're able to. That's the best case scenario from a financial perspective. But of course, you might not be in the financial position to do so, and you might still need a car for a variety of reasons. And if that's the case, then it might mean taking on a car payment. Now, car payments are actually very common in North America. Back in 2023, car loans were actually being called the new mortgages because unfortunately, they were taking up such a high percentage of people's household budgets.
So for anyone who does decide to finance a car, the second guideline that you can use is the 23-8 rule. There's also another popular one called the 24-10 rule, and both are great and can be used because their goal is to make sure that owning a car remains affordable and doesn't lead to ridiculous amounts of debt. The reason that we personally prefer the 23-8 rule is because it does focus on reducing your monthly payment, but more importantly, it focuses on having a shorter loan term and less interest paid over time. Here's how it works. If you're looking at a $20,000 car, then you'd put $4,000 as a down payment when you're buying the car. The reason that this rule has you doing this is because it makes handling your payments a lot easier over time, and it also tries to ensure that you're in a financial position to take on a car loan should you need one, in case you can't pay for the car 100% in full. Unfortunately, where a lot of people go wrong is they end up financing 100% of the car, or they don't put enough money down as a down payment. This can easily become a terrible situation, especially when you're trying to buy a car that you can't necessarily afford. For example, let's say that you're trying to buy a $20,000 car again. So you finance the entire amount, meaning that you take on a $20,000 loan. After 1 year, the car depreciates by 20%, which again is very common, and the car is now worth $16,000 at the end of year one. So if you wanted to sell it, or if you had to sell it because you could no longer handle the monthly cost of the car, then you might be able to get $16,000 for it. But once again, you'd likely still owe more than the car is actually worth. This is what they call being underwater on a car. Now, this is a very simplified explanation of it, but keep in mind, this happens to people all the time. It's also a reminder to look into used cars that are at least 3 to 5+ years old so that you're not being hit by that crazy depreciation.
Now, the next part of the 23-8 rule is the 3. And this refers to the fact that you shouldn't finance a car for more than 3 years. Why? Because a 3-year or 36-month time period allows you to have an ideal monthly payment that isn't too high, making it financially manageable, or too low, because that would be extending how long you'll be paying off the car for, and it also means that you'd be paying more in interest over time, which isn't a good thing. For example, you might hear two people talking about the fact that they have the exact same car payment, but one drives a Toyota Corolla and the other drives a Benz. Now, even though their car payment might be the exact same amount, the length of their terms could be drastically different, not to mention the interest rates. Now, the last part of this rule is the 8. This represents your total monthly car expenses. So think your car payment, your insurance, your gas, and your maintenance. Ideally, this rule wants you to keep these expenses all below 8% of your gross monthly earnings. So what that means is if you make $60,000, that's $5,000 a month in gross earnings, so no more than $400 in monthly car expenses. Also, if you do buy a car using these numbers and then your income goes up, just because that would mean that you can take on a larger loan, it doesn't mean that you should. That would be called lifestyle creep. Now, it is natural to pay more for certain things as your lifestyle changes. Like, for example, if you have 4 kids and they no longer fit into your sedan, then maybe it would make sense to buy something that's more suitable. But keep in mind that this is dependent on what you actually need, not just buying more just to buy because you can afford it. Now, even though we said that we are pro buying used cars and also pro buying cars in cash, we do see that this rule is a way that allows people to buy a car and still manage their regular lives and their financial lives. We also understand that running these numbers might not actually lead you to a car budget that allows you to buy your dream car, but it will allow you to buy the right car for you right now. In general, it's unfortunate that there's been such a normalization of car payments as like the default option when it comes to buying a car, with different car dealerships even offering their own financing payment options in order to make more sales. In general, it can really lead to people overlooking the financial strain that these monthly car expenses can put on their lives and their budget.
Now, the last thing that I want to touch on is what the current used car market is looking like right now. Throughout 2024, prices went down, but for the past 6 straight months in 2025, prices have actually gone up. There's been a continued low supply of cars, both used and new, and a high demand for used cars specifically. If we look at the average price of the 50 best-selling used car models in Canada, specifically used cars from 2015 or newer and with under 200,000 kilometers, the average price for a Toyota Corolla and a Honda Civic were $22,171 and $22,859 in the month of May. Now, this doesn't mean that they're all selling at these prices. Depending on the year, the number of kilometers, and the condition of the vehicle, you'll see a range that takes you anywhere from about $15,000 to $28,000 on Clutch and Auto Trader for cars that are in that 3 to 5 year range in age. Also, according to Square One Insurance, when you're comparing car options and you're specifically looking at mileage, a low mileage is considered to be anywhere from 10,000 kilometers or less per year. A moderate mileage is considered to be anywhere from 10 to 20,000 kilometers per year, and a high mileage is considered to be anywhere from 20,000 kilometers or above per year. Now, I know that we covered a lot in this video, and there's still so much to look into in the world of cars. If you're still wondering whether or not you should buy versus lease versus finance a car, we'll actually be dropping another video soon that dives deeper into that conversation, so make sure you stay tuned. With that being said, let us know down in the comments what kind of car you drive, if you have one, whether or not you feel like you can comfortably afford it, and if you've ever thought of upgrading your car just because. And just like that, we'll see you guys next week with another video.